Hello, everybody. How to Write Romantasy is available for pre-order right now, and you have the option to receive a free digital workbook that will help you craft a power couple, throuple, or polycule that readers will devour. All the details are in the description. Get on it. On to today's topic. In honor of the upcoming release of How to Write Romantasy, I am interviewing popular romantasy authors so we can learn from them and see exactly how they achieved their success. And today we're talking to international award-winning author Belinda Kroll all about how to write Gaslamp romance. Belinda Kroll writes and illustrates cozy fantasy romance where Jane Austen vocabulary meets modern sass. She is obsessed with eyeglasses, Korean dramas, home renovation shows, and dancing the Lindy Hop. Belinda pets every dog that lets her, though she's quickly becoming a crazy cat lady, and she lives with her family in Ohio. Belinda Kroll's book, A Spirited Engagement, is a fantastic example of Gaslamp fantasy romance at its finest. So who better to speak to when trying to learn more about this very specific and very popular subgenre? Butters, are you sinking? You look so crazy. Thank you so much for joining us, Belinda.
I am so happy to be here.
Yay, I'm so excited. Let's start with the basics. What exactly constitutes Gaslamp fiction or Gaslamp romance?
This is a great question because many people would say there is no one definition because we're all still figuring it out. There was one definition that I really appreciated from either Tilly Wallace or Colleen Cowley. The gist was essentially you are writing a world that has magic as part of its foundation in a recognizably historical time period. And the Gaslamp part is, it needs to have a little bit of gothic with it. Regency romance is kind of more of the ballroom fantasy of manners, right? Because you think of Jane Austen plus magic. Gaslamp would be more Charlotte Bronte plus magic. So just think of that slightly more gothic. It's later in the century of the 1800s, but you kind of can go free-reign with that. It's a loose definition, but it is one that seems to fit enough of the authors, and I think it fits the Amazon category.
That's awesome. I had no idea about the gothic element, so I'm learning new things already. That's super cool. That already makes it even more interesting to me. I mean, I love all things fantasy, but I'm like, gothic? Ooh, okay, that's really cool.
Yes. Like even my books, which are like pretty silly, I am still writing about the fact that like you can't get rid of this ghost that's just like bothering you. And like, well, how do they become a ghost and why are they hunting you? And like, so that's my like little train of gothic in there of, we're still talking about dead people, you know? Like,
yeah.
They're really funny ghosts, but they're still dead.
They're still dead. Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of important.
Yeah.
So this question was requested by one of my patrons over on Patreon, HB Lee. Where would you say is the line between historical accuracy and fantasy when it comes to Gaslamp fiction?
That is such a good question. And it honestly made me immediately think of, okay, well, what's the line between historical accuracy and historical romance? Because if you think about it, especially with the number of historical romances, like there were not that many dukes running around in like 1811 England. But somehow everywhere we turn, there's a duke.
There's a new duke.
There's a new duke that needs to like be shown the proper way and to find the love of his life, you know. For me, I feel like that's kind of that similar line, right? It's like there needs to be enough historical accuracy in there that your general reader base is going to say, oh, I know where you are. I know the social mores. I know they should be riding horse carriages and not driving a Tesla. So like there should be enough there to build the world to make it clear where we are, when we are. But the level of how deep you want to go with historical accuracy is kind of on you as the writer. There's a writer, Jacqueline Benson, and her books are so heavily researched. Like I feel like I'm reading Indiana Jones meets the Mummy. Her books, like they're so good. And like you'll go and they'll be like, wait a minute, like what was that word she used? And you go look it up and it's like, oh, this is like an entire culture that she referenced, you know? So I think how deep you go is dependent on your story. You know, my books, it's like, you know, they have a bustle, you know, we're like in London, they use horse-drawn carriages, they walk around a lot. And there are the social mores that bring the romantic tension. And that's actually where I like to play, is like the Victorian rules of courtship is like fascinating to me. But in general, yeah, the line is pretty blurry, honestly. It's pretty blurry, but the accuracy, I think, is how accurate do you need it to be for your story to be plausible and for your audience to suspend their disbelief.
That makes total sense. And I'll see a lot of people in my writing group who are like, oh, I'm writing historical fiction, but do I need to write about people who actually existed? And I'm like, it's still fiction.
It's still fiction.
These people are made up. Like the setting can have existed, like if it takes place in London, but at the end of the day, you're writing about fake people probably living fake lives and doing fake things. And in this case, it's like there are ghosts and possibly magic and things like that.
Yeah. So like with my second book, I was researching a lot about spiritualist societies in London, 1880s. I actually found a society that had gone defunct about 10 years before. And I was like, perfect. I can write what I want about it, because like it doesn't exist anymore. Or I can like play with it a little bit. And there was like another society where it was like I think they're still in formation today. They're under a different name now, and they have a slightly different, mission. But there was enough there where I could say, oh, if I just injected this character and made him the chairman, then I could have a whole subplot that shouldn't insult that group because they've never had chairman. This character doesn't exist. And at the end of the day, there's nothing negative we're saying about the organization itself. Is who have a bad actor in the organization. So again, it's like you do have to be careful because things could still be around and you could still fall on the wrong side of someone's opinion.
Yeah, that's something that we talk about a lot in my writing group is people will be referencing things that already exist.
Yeah.
And I think the general rule is so long as you are not slandering them, it's okay to talk about them,
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's always good to check because some individuals or organizations do not want to be named. I was listening to Joanna Penn's podcast, and she was saying about how there are many churches in Europe where you can't take pictures of them. Even if you were to write a book and you use your own picture, you're not allowed to use that because that church has put rules that no, we control our image and we have pictures to send to you that we can license to you or, variety. But there are rules out there. So it is helpful. Just do a double check. Just a quick Google.
Always good to double check. So obviously Gaslamp fiction requires some level of historical influence. So how would you recommend world building within this genre?
I love to actually read in the genre as well because there's the reality, the historicalness of it. And then there's what translates and resonates with your reader audience today. There are Gaslamp books written now that 20 years ago, when we wouldn't have called them Gaslamp, but they may actually emphasize different parts of the genre. In terms of world building, I love finding movies that are in this genre. Things like The Legend of Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp. Honestly, just about any Johnny Depp movie would probably get you into the right world. World building for a character-driven, you need to understand what are the social rules. Are men and women allowed to be in the same place together? And then what rules do you want to break or play with? So I think understanding what is the mode of transportation? What are the politics of the era? Honestly, it's a lot like fantasy building, but you're pulling from facts you found in a book rather than from your imagination.
That makes total sense.
And especially if you are writing a historical fantasy, maybe there's a society and they're training up to be part of this magical thing where, in the real world, maybe that thing was a particular school or boarding school or something like that. Again, you could throw any sort of magical boarding school into any era and then play with what are the social mores, how does the dress change what they do? For instance, I have a scene where my character, she's basically a black ghostbuster kicking butt in all refinery in 1880s England. And she says at one point, I will let you buy me this dress, but the sleeves can't be too tight because I need to be able to move for when a ghost comes to get me, right? And then, of course, the next chapter starts, of course, the sleeves were too tight, because that was the fashion. Find what interests you. I love fashion. I love interdynamics of people. So that's where a lot of my information is getting pulled from.
Yes, I love fashion, especially in fantasy too. And I get a little disappointed when I'm reading fantasy books where you can, be creative with that. I'm like, oh, but they're just wearing leathers, So Gaslamp fantasy really appeals to me because it's dresses and bustles and, all that good stuff.
You can hide so many things in those layers of fabric. Also, I think part of Gaslamp Fantasy, what makes it fun for people is you can challenge people's current assumptions of the past, right?
Mhm.
Like the pervading assumption that corsets were terrible and bad and no one could breathe. Maybe for the top 1%, for the
Right.
people who are meant to sit and look pretty and a little uncomfortable. But like everyone else, you
Back
wore a
support.
corset because that was the shape you needed to fit into the dress, but you also still had to do your chores. You were still the maid in the house. You were still working on the farm. You know, I'm sure one day in the future, someone will say, oh my God, I can't believe they wear bras every day. Like, you know, it's the same thing for us.
I couldn't agree more. So, historical romance has its own set of rules and genre expectations that can be different from other romance subgenres like fantasy romance. Is that the case with Gaslamp fiction? And if so, what would you say are the key points to keep in mind?
This is an excellent question. And I think because you're merging the genres, it's not just the emerging history and romance, you're also now throwing fantasy on top. So you do have to figure out your trifecta of like, where do you want your balance to be? Do you want to be more historical? Do you want to be more romantic? Do you want to be more magical? Because then that will actually tell you which genre beats and rules to follow more religiously, like more faithfully. I was really struggling with a book once because I was spending so much time trying to build up the magic. But then I realized, like, wait a minute, like I'm writing a romance. At the end of the day, do my romance readers care that they have types of magic? Or do they care that the hero and the heroine have opposing types of magic, but there's still an attraction there and they need to reconcile that? That was a big learning point for me, I think, of whichever part of your genre stew is most forward, that's probably the genre you're going to be marketing to, and that's the genre you want to make sure that you're following your readers' expectations. Yes, historical romance has some rules. Fantasy lets you bend some of those rules, but again, it's good to do it with intention, and then that way you do get that crossover between your reader bases.
That's something that I talk about a lot is, you know, I'll have people who, like, for example, are just getting started with Romantasy, and they'll be creating these really elaborate magic systems, and which is great, you know, but it'll show up in maybe like 2 scenes, and they've got like a whole encyclopedia for this magic system, and most of the book is just about these people kissing, and I'm like, I think you are putting your focus in the wrong spot.
Yeah, and it's really freeing, I think, once you realize that, because I felt a lot of pressure to do that magic world building, and it was like pulling teeth. I didn't actually care, you know. I don't care. I like romance, but I also like romance with a little bit of, let's throw Charmed in, you know, like I grew up on Charmed and Buffy and Sailor Moon, and so like to me there's always a little bit of magic somewhere. I just can't see it, you know, like there's just like step through the portal and now you see a completely different lens on the world. That's how I do my Gaslamp Romantasy, really.
And romance is my preference too, so you're speaking my language. I'm like, I love fantasy, but I'm usually there for like the fantasy is more like the cherry on top. You know, it's not the main course. So what are some common pitfalls or mistakes to avoid when writing Gaslamp fiction or romance?
So I think for Gaslamp fiction, it would be just because you're writing about a historical era does not mean you need to adopt the things we've evolved past from that historical era. Like, for instance, I've decided all my books moving forward are going to have interracial couples. I want to see more interracial couples. I am the product of one. I am in one myself, and I don't see enough of that in fantasy. So, hey, I'm going to do that. If you have a problem with that, I'm going to question the premise, because if you can't see that there was an interracial couple in 1880s, but you're totally cool with a ghost.
Exactly.
You're clearly not my reader. So I think that's just a thing to keep in mind is as you are exploring historical eras, pick and choose what you're bringing with you into the story and make sure it's for a reason, you know, like you don't just want like casual racism or misogyny or whatever, just because, oh, sure, that's what we see that era as. Well, every culture has a range, and I'm sure there were liberal thinkers and conservative thinkers. And you just need to figure out where your characters fit in that and pick and choose what fits the story and doesn't alienate your reader.
That's something that comes up, especially like a lot in fantasy, where they'll be like, oh, I'm including this, you know, casual sexual assault scene because it's historical accuracy. And it's like, well, you also have dragons, and that's not historically accurate.
Yeah.
So...
And I think too, like then there's the opposite of like, oh, well, this Fae culture, they're black. And it's like, sure, but why? They could be blue. Like, why are they specifically this? If you were going to make them blue, you'd have a reason to make them blue. If they're going to be black, why are they black? Did they come from a particular part of the world? Did they, you know, it's like, what's going on? why are they here now? Are they just here because you need someone in the scene or because it's like meaningful to the story? Well, I'm all for inclusion, but like, again, let's make it make sense.
Yes, this is something that definitely needs to be said because it's one of the biggest things that I see people, just throwing a fit about in fiction. And it's like, so you can suspend your disbelief for the fact that these women in these books are clean shaven and have perfect teeth and don't smell, but you can't suspend your disbelief for an interracial couple. Okay, I think that's a personal problem.
Yeah, it's wild. And I think probably another pitfall for Gaslamp romance, or Gaslamp in general, is it doesn't have to be Eurocentric. There's an entire world that existed in 1880. And I even had someone once say like, well, she wouldn't have talked to that person, or like he's not, you described him as being really tan. And I was like, they were Italians in 1880. And it was just sort of like, oh wow, okay, like take a step back, don't engage. But also, like, it is wild the assumptions that you end up tripping into. If you have the opportunity to branch out of Europe, one, you're going to learn a lot. Two, it's probably going to be a lot more interesting because it's just not the standard. And three, you'll probably have more room to play because you'll be like the first in that area. You're almost defining what that means to be Gaslamp in that part of the world. Gaslamp in general the term does sort of reference the gas lamps of London in the Victorian era. 1837 to 1903 was the era of Victoria. But again, like, the UK was an empire at that point. They were all over.
Right.
So you could still take advantage of that historically and put your own spin on it.
Yes. I love that. So thanks so much for stopping by. Do you have any projects in the works, and where can everyone find you online?
So I am currently working on book 3 of my standalone Romantasy series called An Uncanny Bargain. If anyone has seen, oh my gosh, now I'm forgetting the name of it. It's a Lily Tomlin and Steve Martin movie from the 80s where basically it's two souls trapped in one body. And
I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember.
Effect. And like for the life of me, it's like, it's not as you, all of me, two souls trapped in one body, plus Casper gets to be a real boy at the end. And that's essentially what An Uncanny Bargain is.
I love that.
But in 1880s rural England, in like a little manor house. And I do design and illustrate my books.
Wow.
And so I do have a Kickstarter that's a placeholder for when I'm done writing the book. But that would be probably the next project to watch for. You can find me everywhere as Worderella. So that's like Cinderella, but with words. I am mostly on Instagram. I do have a website. My website is my like home base for my signed and illustrated book. And then you'll see me pop around in lots of places, but for the most part, Worderella.com/links gets you everywhere.
And I will have everything linked below.
Awesome.
So that's all we got for you today. How to Write Romantasy comes out in October, so if you're trying to write your very own fantasy romance novel, pre-order it today. Even better, if you pre-order, you can receive a bonus digital workbook. All you have to do is submit your proof of purchase. I've got the details in the description below. You can also check out my first writing craft book, Shut Up and Write the Book, or you can check out the first 2 books in my award-winning Romantasy series, The Savior's Champion and The Savior's Sister. They're all linked below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I post new videos on Wednesdays and I host live streams on Mondays. And if you want to be alerted as soon as I upload, ring that bell. Bye. Have you subscribed to my channel yet? I mean, you totally should. I post new videos on Wednesdays. I also host live streams on Mondays, and they're super fun. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel and be sure to ring that bell. That way you're alerted as soon as I post new content.